regenerating images in memory. And you
Yeah,
mentioned that there's neuroscience that backs that up. Can you speak for a minute about that?
sure. Yeah, I would love to. So, the year 2000, a graduate student discovered that we can actually destabilize or unlock emotional memory. So, emotional memory is not permanent and it's different than factual memory. There is a discernment between the two. So, that emotional memory is very subjective. To open it, you have to be in the memory. That's the way it gets destabilized. So, by being in the memory again, then we can redo it. But there's so many tools that use thought to try and consciously redo a memory. But if you're not in the memory, it doesn't work. It's just an intellectual overlay. Does that make sense, Jack?
Yeah, yeah, I think it does. So you said you want to follow it rather than lead it. So tell us how someone comes in, they present something to you, and then how do you follow that back to this original memory that needs to be regenerated, if you will?
Right. So, what we're doing is we're collaborating with the organic emotional system. So, we actually have them close their eyes, or some people, like, people who have been traumatized sometimes need to keep their eyes open, and that's fine too. It's just having the client begin to focus inward, begin to become aware. So, you could say you're moving into a meditative state, but we're not introducing particular images into that state. We're allowing the person to start to become aware of their body. So it's very body centered. And that's really critical because that's where emotional memory gets stored, is in the body and the nervous system and the brain, and also where it originates. So it originates in a nonverbal way. So that we're using body awareness, the senses, all of the senses, and imagination, both of those. So what happens is we're following the client's experience. Would you want to work do a little bit with me, Jack, with that initial? So yeah, just close your eyes for a minute. And so just let your attention drop down into your belly so that you're aware of your body. And as you just notice, you're also breathing, you settle in. What are you noticing? What's calling your attention first?
There's kind of a tension on the sides of my neck going down into the top of my shoulders. I just felt like it was a process that was unfolding. It was more like just floating down a river, just allowing the river to go where it went, if that makes any
Yes.
sense, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the things, and you probably noticed this in the process, we were giving emotion form. The imagination is giving emotion form. So it has an appearance, because the left brain gets really afraid of emotion. It's really intimidated because it's invisible. And because emotion feels invisible, it feels like consuming. So when we're angry, we can feel so afraid of being consumed by the anger because it's like it's everywhere because it's invisible. I can't tell, but it feels like this huge monster that's going to eat me alive or other people alive. And that's what scares us from allowing our emotional system to work the way it's supposed to. Something that it can measure, that it can analyze, that it can actually, figure out, then it becomes empowered to be a partner with the emotional, creative part of the brain that brought the image in the first place. So it really is different.
Now that's really interesting because when I was a psychotherapist years and years ago, we'd constantly hear people say, if I start crying, I'll never stop. If I get angry, you're going to have to pull I'll explode. You're going to have to scrape me off the walls. And that sense of no boundary. And, I'd always say something smart ass like I've never had anyone cry for 2 weeks, or I've never had to scrape anyone off the wall, just to kind of, but what you're saying about the idea of it having a visual boundary, which makes it containable and less scary, more
Mhm.
manageable. Like I saw that lava literally just going down the hall, eating up rooms where I had bad memories, you know,
Right.
and until all of a sudden the school dissolved, and then there was a gym across the creek, which was part of the school, dissolved, and then it was all just like dead land, and then all of a sudden grass started to grow and butterflies and flowers and kids playing, and it's fascinating. Well, I think I'm going to make a statement. I think I find, and I wonder if you do too, that when people have what I would call emotional reactions that seem to be disproportionate to the current stimulus, that it's usually something that's triggering something that's been there in the past, and then like my volcano comes roaring out because
Right.
someone else tried, like my wife might have said, you can't go bowling with the guys or something, and then I go, and it's like,
Right.
yeah. And so when we're healing or releasing and re-imaging all this stuff, then we become less reactive in the present moment to things that we shouldn't be exploding about or caving in.
Absolutely.
you know
Yeah, yeah. When it's an overreaction, it means now you're reacting to the current situation, but has a thread to bigger situations earlier that were more traumatic. And in fact, in RIM, what happens in the research now grounds this, that when PTSD is cumulative, so that when somebody has had trauma in their life, it leaves them more vulnerable to having PTSD in a situation where somebody else who didn't have trauma earlier doesn't.